Vain bikers laugh at a lone man at a gas station. His secret leaves them in terror. In the heart of a small town, nestled between rolling hills and endless stretches of highway, stood a gas station that had seen better days. Its paint was chipped, its pumps were rusty, and the flickering neon sign above the entrance read Lucky's in faded red letters. Despite its worn appearance, the station remained a vital pit stop for travelers and locals alike, offering a brief respite from the road and a chance to refuel both their vehicles and their spirits. But in recent months, the gas station had become a source of fear and intimidation for many in the community. A group of bikers, known as the Hell's Fury, had claimed the spot as their own, transforming the once welcoming atmosphere into a den of menace and mockery. They were a rough bunch, clad in black leather and adorned with tattoos that spoke of their rebellious nature. Their motorcycles, gleaming chrome beasts, were always parked in a neat row outside the station, like sentinels guarding their territory. The leader of the pack was a man named Razor, a towering figure with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his left eye to the corner of his mouth. He exuded an air of danger, his mere presence enough to silence even the most boisterous of patrons. Razor reveled in the power he held over others, taking pleasure in the fear he saw in their eyes as they scurried past him, avoiding eye contact and praying they wouldn't become his next target. On a scorching summer afternoon, the Hell's Fury gathered at Lucky's, their laughter and raucous banter filling the air. They lounged on their bikes, sipping beer and trading stories of their latest exploits. The other customers, mostly truck drivers and families on road trips, kept their distance, not wanting to draw the bikers' attention. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, a lone figure emerged from the highway, his silhouette backlit by the orange glow of the setting sun. He rode a motorcycle, but it was unlike any of the bikes parked outside the station. It was a classic, a beautifully restored Indian Chief, its paint a deep, rich burgundy that seemed to absorb the light around it. The man himself was unassuming, dressed in a simple white t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of worn boots. His face was weathered, his eyes a piercing blue that spoke of a life lived on the road. He pulled into the station, the rumble of his engine drawing the attention of the Hell's Fury. Razor looked up, his eyes narrowing as he watched the stranger dismount his bike and make his way toward the store. There was something about the man that unsettled him, a quiet confidence that seemed out of place in the presence of the bikers. As the man entered the store, Razor turned to his fellow bikers, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with disdain. Looks like we got ourselves a new plaything, boys. Inside the gas station, the lone rider made his way to the counter, his boots scuffing against the worn linoleum floor. The cashier, a young woman named Sarah, looked up from her magazine, her eyes widening as she took in the man's appearance. He was older than most of the customers who frequented the station, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of a life lived on the road. "Evening," the man said, his voice a low rumble. "Could I get a pack of smokes and a fill-up on pump 3? Sarah nodded, ringing up his purchase as she tried to ignore the feeling of unease that had settled in her stomach. She had seen the way the bikers outside had watched the man, their eyes filled with a predatory gleam that she knew all too well. As the man handed over a few crumpled bills, Sarah leaned in closer, her voice a whisper. "Be careful out there," she warned, her eyes darting to the window where the Hell's Fury could be seen lounging on their bikes. "Those guys, they're not the kind you want to mess with." The man's eyes followed her gaze, a flicker of recognition passing over his face. "Don't worry about me, darlin'," he said, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I've dealt with their kind before." With that, he tucked the pack of cigarettes into his pocket and made his way back outside, leaving Sarah to watch him go with a sense of trepidation. As the man emerged from the store, the Hell's Fury stood to attention, their postures straightening as they eyed him with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Razor stepped forward, his arms crossed over his broad chest as he blocked the man's path to his bike. "Well, look what we have here," Razor sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "A little lost lamb wandering into the wolf's den." The man looked up at Razor, his blue eyes steady as he met the biker's gaze. I'm not lost, he said, his voice even. Just passing through. Razor let out a harsh bark of laughter, the sound echoing across the gas station lot. Hear that, boys? He called out to his fellow bikers. The old man thinks he's just passing through. The other bikers joined in the laughter, their voices a cacophony of cruelty as they circled around the man, their eyes glinting with malice. You don't just pass through Hell's Fury territory, Razor said, his voice low and menacing. Not without paying the price. The man stood his ground, his posture relaxed even as the bikers closed in around him. I don't want any trouble, he said, his voice calm. Just let me be on my way. Razor's face twisted into a sneer, his eyes narrowing as he leaned in closer to the man. Trouble's already found you, old man, he growled. And now you're gonna learn what happens when you cross the Hell's Fury. The tension in the air was palpable as the Hell's Fury surrounded the lone rider, their faces twisted into sneers of disdain. Razor, the leader of the pack, stood mere inches from the man, his eyes boring into him with the intensity that would have sent lesser men running for cover. But the rider remained unfazed, his posture relaxed even as the bikers closed in around him. There was something about his demeanor that unsettled Razor, a quiet confidence that seemed out of place in the face of such overwhelming odds. You think you're tough, old man? Razor snarled, his voice a low growl. You think you can just waltz into our territory and act like you own the place? The rider met Razor's gaze, his blue eyes steady. I told you, he said, his voice even. I don't want any trouble. I'm just here to get gas and be on my way. Razor let out a harsh bark of laughter, the sound echoing across the gas station lot. Trouble's already found you, he sneered. And now you're gonna learn what happens when you disrespect the Hell's Fury. With a nod of his head, Razor signaled to his fellow bikers. They began to circle the rider, their movements predatory as they closed in around him. One of the bikers, a hulking brute with a shaved head and a tattoo of a skull on his neck, stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. Let's teach this old man a lesson, he growled, his voice filled with menace. But before the biker could take another step, the rider spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. I wouldn't do that if I were you, he said, his tone calm but firm. The bikers paused, their eyes narrowing as they looked at the rider with a mix of confusion and disdain. And why's that? Razor asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The rider looked at Razor, his gaze unwavering. Because if you lay a hand on me, he said, his voice low and steady, you'll be starting a war you can't win. Razor's face twisted into a sneer, his eyes flashing with anger. And who's gonna stop us? He demanded. You? You're just one man. You don't stand a chance against the Hell's Fury. The rider smiled, the expression devoid of humor. I may be just one man, he said, but I have friends in high places. Friends who don't take kindly to bullies and thugs like you. Razor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty passing over his face. What are you talking about, old man? He growled. The rider reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, black object. He held it up, the metal glinting in the fading light of the sun. This is a military challenge coin, he said, his voice steady. It was given to me by a very important person. A person who doesn't like it when his friends are threatened. Razor's face paled, his eyes widening as he stared at the coin in the rider's hand. He had heard stories of challenge coins, of the power and respect they commanded in certain circles. And if this man had one, it meant he was connected to someone with real power. Who are you? Razor asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. The rider smiled, the expression cold and unwavering. My name is Jack, he said, his voice calm, and I'm the man who's going to make sure you never bother this town again. Word of the confrontation at Lucky's gas station spread like wildfire through the small town. The story passed from neighbor to neighbor in hushed whispers and worried glances. The locals had long lived in fear of the Hell's Fury, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked just beyond the town's borders. But now, with the arrival of the mysterious rider, a new sense of hope began to take root. They had seen the way he had stood up to Razor and his gang, the way he had refused to be intimidated by their threats and posturing. and they had heard the rumors of his connection to a powerful military figure, a man who could bring the full force of the law down upon the bikers if they dared to cross him. In the days that followed, the rider became a fixture in the town, his presence a source of comfort and security for the locals. He could often be seen at Lucky's, sipping coffee and chatting with the regulars, his easy smile and gentle demeanor a stark contrast to the rough and tumble bikers who had once dominated the place. But even as the town began to embrace the rider as one of their own, tensions with the Hell's Fury continued to simmer just beneath the surface. Razor and his gang had not forgotten the humiliation they had suffered at the hands of the old man, and they were determined to make him pay for his insolence. They began to escalate their attacks on the town, their cruelty and violence reaching new heights as they sought to assert their dominance once more. They vandalized storefronts, harassed innocent bystanders, and even attacked a group of teenagers who had dared to stand up to them. Through it all, the rider remained a steady presence, his calm demeanor and unwavering courage a beacon of hope for the beleaguered townspeople. He worked tirelessly to unite the community, organizing neighborhood watch groups and encouraging the locals to stand together against the bikers. And slowly but surely, the town began to push back against the Hell's Fury. They refused to be cowed by the bikers' threats, standing firm in the face of their aggression and violence. They rallied around the rider, drawing strength from his example and his leadership. But even as the town grew stronger, the Hell's Fury grew more desperate. They knew that they were losing their grip on the community, and they were willing to do whatever it took to maintain their power. One night, as the rider made his way back to his motel room after a long day of working with the locals, he was ambushed by a group of bikers. They surrounded him, their faces twisted into sneers of hatred and rage. "You think you're so tough, old man?" Razor snarled, his voice a low growl. "You think you can just come into our town and take over?" The rider looked at Razor, his blue eyes steady. "This was never your town," he said, his voice calm. "It belongs to the people who live here, the people who work and raise their families here. And they're not going to let you take it from them." Razor's face contorted with fury, his hand reaching for the knife at his belt. But before he could draw the weapon, a voice rang out from the shadows. "That's enough, Razor." The bikers turned, their eyes widening as they saw the figure emerging from the darkness. It was Sarah, the young cashier from Lucky's, her face set with determination. "This ends now," she said, her voice steady. "We're not going to let you hurt anyone else." And behind her, emerging from the shadows, were the townspeople. They stood tall and proud, their faces filled with a newfound courage and resolve. They had come to stand with the rider, to show the Hell's Fury that they would not be intimidated any longer. As the townspeople stood united behind Sarah and the rider, the Hell's Fury found themselves outnumbered and outmatched. They looked to Razor for guidance, their eyes filled with uncertainty and fear. But Razor was not ready to back down. He had built his reputation on fear and intimidation, and he was not about to let some old man and a bunch of locals take that away from him. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You think a few cops and a mob of peasants can stop the Hell's Fury?" The rider stepped forward, his blue eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "It's not just the cops and the townspeople," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's the power of a community united. It's the strength that comes from standing together against those who would seek to divide and conquer." Razor let out a harsh bark of laughter, the sound echoing through the night air. "Pretty words, old man," he sneered. "But they won't save you from the Hell's Fury." With a nod of his head, Razor signaled to his men. They began to advance on the rider and the townspeople, their faces twisted into sneers of malice and aggression. But before they could take more than a few steps, a brilliant light flooded the area, blinding the bikers and stopping them in their tracks. The sound of sirens filled the air, and a fleet of police cars and military vehicles came roaring into view. At the head of the convoy was a man in a crisp military uniform, his chest adorned with medals and ribbons. He stepped out of his vehicle, his eyes scanning the scene before him. "I am Colonel James Harrison," he announced, his voice booming through the night air. "And I am here to put an end to the reign of terror that the Hell's Fury has inflicted upon this town." Razor's face paled, his eyes widening with fear and recognition. He knew the name of Colonel Harrison, knew the power and influence that he wielded, and he knew that he was in trouble. The colonel turned to the rider, a smile spreading across his weathered face. "Jack," he said, his voice warm with affection. "It's good to see you again, old friend." The rider returned the smile, his blue eyes twinkling with mischief. "I told you I'd call if I ever needed your help," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. The colonel nodded, his gaze turning back to the bikers. "And I told you that I would always have your back," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "Now, let's take care of these punks once and for all." With a wave of his hand, the colonel signaled to his men. They moved in on the bikers, their weapons at the ready. The Hell's Fury, realizing that they were outmatched and outnumbered, began to back away, their faces filled with fear and desperation. But it was too late. The military and the police had them surrounded, their escape routes cut off. One by one, the bikers were taken into custody, their weapons confiscated and their bikes impounded. As the last of the Hell's Fury was led away in handcuffs, the townspeople erupted into cheers and applause. They had won. They had stood together against the bikers, and they had emerged victorious. The rider turned to Sarah, his blue eyes shining with pride and admiration. "You were amazing," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "You showed true courage and leadership tonight." Sarah blushed, her eyes filling with tears of joy and relief. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You gave us the strength and the courage to stand up for ourselves." The rider shook his head, a smile spreading across his face. "No," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "The strength and the courage were always within you. I just helped you to find it." In the wake of the Hell's Fury's defeat, the small town underwent a transformation. The fear and intimidation that had once gripped the community gave way to a newfound sense of unity and purpose. The locals came together to rebuild what had been broken, to heal the wounds that had been inflicted by the bikers' reign of terror. At the heart of this transformation was Jack, the mysterious rider who had stood up to Razor and his gang. He became a symbol of hope and resilience for the townspeople, a living embodiment of the power of courage and compassion. Jack worked tirelessly to help the town recover, lending his strength and his wisdom to anyone who needed it. He helped to organize community events, bringing people together to celebrate their shared heritage and their common bonds. He worked with local business owners to rebuild their storefronts, helping them to create a new vision for the future of the town. And through it all, he remained a steadfast friend and mentor to Sarah, the young cashier from Lucky's who had shown such bravery in the face of the Hell's Fury. Under Jack's guidance, Sarah blossomed into a true leader, her natural charisma and intelligence shining through as she helped to guide the town towards a brighter tomorrow. As the weeks turned into months, the town began to thrive once more. New businesses opened their doors, bringing fresh energy and vitality to the once struggling community. The streets were filled with laughter and joy, the sound of children playing and neighbors chatting over fences. And at the center of it all was Lucky's gas station, the place where it had all begun. The old station had been given a new lease on life, its faded paint replaced with a bright, welcoming color scheme. The pumps were shiny and new, the shelves stocked with fresh snacks and drinks. But the real heart of Lucky's was the people who worked there, the folks who had stood together against the Hell's Fury and emerged victorious. Sarah was now the manager of the station, her natural leadership skills and friendly demeanor making her a beloved figure in the community. And Jack was always there, too, ready with a kind word or a helping hand whenever anyone needed it. He had become a fixture in the town, a guardian angel who watched over the people he had come to love. As the years passed, the town continued to flourish under the watchful eye of Jack and Sarah. The once sleepy community had been transformed into a vibrant, thriving hub of activity, a place where people from all walks of life could come together in harmony and friendship. But even as the town grew and changed, the memory of the Hell's Fury lingered in the minds of those who had lived through their reign of terror. The scars that had been inflicted by the bikers' cruelty and violence were slow to heal, the wounds that had been opened not easily forgotten. And so, On the anniversary of the day that Jack had first ridden into town, the people of the community gathered together to honor the man who had saved them from the darkness. They came from far and wide, young and old, rich and poor, all united in their gratitude and their love for the mysterious rider who had changed their lives forever. As Jack stood before the assembled crowd, his eyes shining with emotion, he felt a sense of pride and humility wash over him. He had never sought fame or recognition for his actions, had never wanted anything more than to help those in need. But as he looked out at the faces of the people he had come to call his friends, he knew that he had made a difference in their lives, had helped to create something truly special in this small corner of the world. "I am honored and humbled by your kindness," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But the real heroes of this story are not me, but all of you. You are the ones who stood together in the face of fear and intimidation, who refused to be cowed by those who would seek to divide and conquer. You are the ones who showed the world that the power of unity and compassion can overcome even the darkest of forces." As he spoke, Jack's eyes met Sarah's, and he saw in them a reflection of his own feelings. They had been through so much together, had faced down the very worst that humanity had to offer. But they had emerged stronger and more united than ever before, their bond forged in the crucible of adversity. And as the crowd erupted into cheers and applause, Jack knew that he had found his true calling in life. He had been given a second chance, an opportunity to make a real difference in the world. And he would not waste it, for he knew that the true measure of a man was not in the battles he fought or the enemies he vanquished, but in the lives he touched and the hearts he inspired. And in this small town, in this community that had welcomed him with open arms, he had found his true home and his true family. As the celebration continued into the night, Jack looked up at the stars that twinkled overhead, and he smiled. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But he also knew that he would not face them alone, that he would have the strength and the courage of an entire community behind him. And with that knowledge, he stepped forward into the future, ready to face whatever lay ahead with an open heart and an unshakable resolve. For he was Jack, the rider who had come to save a town, and he would never stop fighting for what was right, no matter the cost.